Hi everyone. While we're waiting, just to say I'm Tom. I work for Camden Council in the regeneration team.
Yep, and I'm Richard Hay. I'm Town Centre Manager for Kilburn, working for Brent Council.
We're here to talk about One Kilburn, which is a community-led approach to regeneration. We've been working away on this for a couple of years. It started with support from the GLA. I think James is here today, and Power to Change as well, and their Community Improvement District pilot, which was a great kind of catalyst for our work. Just to say, it's work in progress. So we're here to learn from other people as much as to share our experience over the last couple of years. In case you've not been there, just want to talk a little bit about Kilburn. It's where Camden, Brent and Westminster meet. So it's in all three of those boroughs, which is really helpful. Bit of a nightmare. A mile-long high road. It's quite linear. 30,000 residents live around it, and there are 420 shops on Richard's latest count. It's a major town centre, 3 TfL stations and lots of bus stops along the way. Local people, when we chat to them, tell us about the things that they cherish about Kilburn, and very often they talk about the amazing VCS sector that they benefit from, the independent shops and theatre. Kilburn Theatre, recommend it. Local market on the Brent side of Kilburn, and the local parks too. But despite that, there's huge health inequality, income inequality. When people stroll along Kilburn High Road, they talk about their experience. They often mention the kind of road safety issues, high pollution, also kind of the look and feel of the high road as well. So that's a real challenge. One of the things that made that challenge even more challenging for many years was the lack of kind of coordinated work between the councils, but also all the different partners that are needed to bring about change in Kilburn. A couple of years ago, again, as I mentioned, kind of the catalyst for Camden's involvement in recent involvement in Kilburn High Road. I say recent because Brent Council, particularly Richard, have been working busily in Kilburn for quite a bit longer. But our most recent piece of work was started, enabled by support from the GLA and Power to Change. But some of the early stuff that we did as two councils focused on setting some of the key foundations of the work. So firstly, I think the main thing to say was about relationships. So the councils, not just about the organisations, but the people within those organisations. So Richard and I mean, I've lost count of the number of walkabouts we did. It got ridiculous at one point, but we were just out and about, getting to know each other, getting to know our colleagues. And then through that, we kind of developed terms of reference. I'm not even sure we've looked at it since, but the principles in there are really important. They were agreed between us. And it was just about how we would work together, and that renewed commitment to focus on Kilburn Town Centre as a shared town centre. And a commitment there too to work together on some projects, which was really good. So we worked from that point to gather data and to really improve our understanding of Kilburn. We also managed to secure some funding, and like some other examples we've heard from this morning, that's often not huge amounts of funding. Brent managed to get some, I think it was COVID recovery funding, and Camden funding from the GLA to start this work, this community-led approach. We had a foundation of business relationships, and Richard will talk soon about the work that he's done with businesses for many years. So that was really good. We had some foundations there. Kind of provoked by the opportunity to apply for levelling up funding as well. That was kind of also an important part of our work. And also developing closer relationships with Westminster was key as well, because a small part of Kilburn to the south is in Westminster, and Joe's here today. We work with Joe and her colleagues too. With those foundations, really, and as a result of not securing the kind of significant transformational levels of funding required to address some of the key challenges that I mentioned there around kind of transport, public realm, we couldn't take the sort of, I suppose, more traditional approach of researching, consulting, developing a plan, and then delivering. for the last 10, 15 years, local people have seen that before. That hasn't happened. They've therefore, a lot of the initial conversations we had with local people showed kind of quite a large amount of cynicism, and I kind of totally understood that because they'd seen lots of plans and a lack of delivery. So instead, our approach was to kind of, I suppose, to borrow the GLA's phrase, to make things happen, do what we could do. And a large part of that was about activation. I'll mention a few projects that we were involved in, and then Richard, maybe you could talk about a couple that you were involved in. But really, our approach was to try and bring in and fund small-scale projects that created participation opportunities, that had a visible effect on the high road, that were bright, and a basis for, I suppose, generating the energy that we wanted to see to develop this new community-led approach to regeneration. So a couple of examples. We worked with TfL to identify a vacant space to the north of Kilburn in Maygrove Road, and ran a competition to find a use to take over that meanwhile or vacant space on the bottom left there. Sorry, the really small photos, but and that was really good at kind of bringing in a new use to the high road. We worked with Camden Black Creatives, an artist collective that completely transformed the space with a small, I think maybe about £10,000 of funding, completely transformed the space and created studio space for artists. Another example, we worked with Library of Things to introduce a new kiosk to enable people to borrow items instead of buying them to reduce waste. So really it was just about bringing new and hopefully exciting things to the high road, but wasn't just Camden-led stuff. So I don't know if Richard, you want to mention a couple of Brent bits and pieces.
Yeah, I think obviously one of the strengths of our partnership is our ability to bring stuff forward jointly and individually. It's always going to be the way with a partnership that there are mismatched resources, competing priorities within your own local authorities. But what we've tried to do is acknowledge and accept that and work to sort of see where we can make linkages. So sometimes there will be a project that comes forward from Brent, sometimes it will come forward from Camden, and sometimes we'll look and sort of agree and do stuff jointly. Maybe not even have the same resources put in, but at least kind of explore the opportunities for doing that. And I think it's important, certainly for us, not to get too partisan about that, because actually what we're looking at here is a much bigger picture. And whatever happens on the high road is all activation. So we're quite happy to steal Camden's success. They're happy to steal ours. And it's happy days all round on that front, because actually what it shows is that we're keeping things moving, ticking forwards, building that narrative and partnership working. So just trying to think, one of the projects we've done recently is called Light Up Kilburn, a massive festival of light where we have activated a load of community buildings with some amazing art installations. And Camden have kind of led that process and put in a big sort of wodge of cash to make that happen. But we've managed to lever in some funding from the Brent side, which wouldn't have happened without Camden being there and kind of saying, look, we can do something better together. So we're always sort of grateful for anything that moves us forward in that sense. Hand the mic back. It's my part anyway. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of business engagement on the high road, and I think it was the case when I sort of got to Kilburn in sort of 2018, and I was there alone, and it felt a very sort of lonely place. You'd sort of rock up, and to me, it's always kind of made sense to go and talk to sort of businesses on both sides of the road. Why wouldn't you? It's on the other side of the road there, and it's all part of the same town centre. But you kind of go over and sort of people would say, "Oh, hello, and are you lost?" And you kind of have to sort of explain sort of why somebody from Brent is talking to a Camden business. And I think we've kind of tried to do that even when we didn't have an offer there initially to kind of promote. So actually, kind of, I talk about the sort of pandemic as a catalyst for change, because I don't think, in all honesty, without the pandemic, we'd be anywhere near the level that we've moved forward today. And I think certainly that comes down to businesses suddenly needing our support. Before they could sort of do things the way they've always done them for sort of 40 years, they might be struggling, but they don't need your help. It's fine. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic comes in, they're forced to close. There's funding available. Businesses love cold, hard cash, don't they? And it's like, yeah, I want those grants. So for me, it's like suddenly there's a chance to get out, talk to businesses, start gathering information and contacts for them, and really start to kind of get them involved. And during this process, my engagement level's gone up from sort of like initially about a third before the pandemic to now like over 3/4 of businesses that we're talking to regularly and are engaged. And that's purely because they do genuinely now need our support. So I think also we've kind of used that opportunity to up our own game as well. It's very easy to kind of say, oh, we come in, we don't have a sort of lot of money. We're not quite sure where to begin with this process, but talk to us anyway, because we sort of want to find out what's going on. And all of a sudden, I think the pandemic has given you that sort of chance to say, actually, there's all these bits of work that are happening. There's all this support out there. Let's get that information out to you and show that we're serious about this as well. And this is where our sort of partnership with Camden is coming, because all of a sudden they came and talked to us and said, we're quite interested in working with Kilburn as well. And for the first time ever, you've kind of got the opportunity for two local authorities to work together. And how rarely does that happen, where you're both sort of really keen on making something happen? So we kind of bit their hand off and went, yeah, thank you very much, come on board. And I think that sort of legitimizes my role in the town centre then, because actually you can say to people, we're doing this jointly, it's a partnership, and we're both serious about it. But also it helps Camden as well, because they don't have a lot of sort of day-to-day presence on the ground. So me being out and about and being that visible face legitimizes their role as well. I think the hitting the ground running is the main thing, and it goes back to sort of my point earlier that you can never be kind of sharing never sort of stop sharing too much of the success, because actually whatever you're doing there is all good stuff ultimately. And I think where sort of Camden have started off initially with the kind of strategic support. So we've had this idea for a sort of local partnership, and we kind of internally we've got our backing to do it, and all of a sudden there's a sort of partner who can come in and gets the funding that makes that happen. And that's great, because all of a sudden we've got a whole new programme moving forward to build this sort of One Kilburn partnership. And that's something I can't do on my own. But equally, Brent has been very active and committed in terms of our practical support to the town centre during this process. And that's something that Camden haven't been able to kind of match on their side. So our business support funds, we've been giving out extra grants to businesses. We've been doing a lot of sort of projects around sort of shutter art, shopfront improvement work, social media training. We were the first London borough to have what we call a sort of Buy Brent local shopping app that we were trialling. And it is great to be able to go out to those sort of Camden businesses and say, hey, do you want to be part of this too? Because now you're part of the family. So that's sort of great. And has allowed us to do kind of so much more. And I think sort of £200,000 of investment supporting sort of over 60 businesses along the way directly really has kind of shown that we are serious on both sides of the road about what we want to do there. I talk about sort of One Kilburn and the excitable community puppies. This is a little bit of sort of tongue-in-cheek thing, but it's an interesting setup in Kilburn, because if you talk to a lot of sort of areas, they'll say the one thing that they're struggling with is the community involvement in this process. The businesses are great, the community are harder to get on board. We have exactly the opposite problem in Kilburn. We've got so many enthusiastic groups and individuals that actually it made real sense for our sort of initial focus of One Kilburn to be entirely focused on bringing the community together, because they were just there raring to go, biting our hands off for this process. And we've had great success with that. I mean, over the last sort of 18 months, we sort of get regular sort of 50 different groups turning up to the partnership meetings, over 300 residents on board. You couldn't really ask for sort of more success. But where we've got the problem with this at the moment is that the businesses are kind of less clear about what their sort of involvement is. I mean, we probably would have always looked to have brought forward a business group at some stage, but actually there's been no kind of real impetus and groundswell from the businesses themselves to make this happen. They're quite happy sort of being on their respective side of the roads, kind of just soldiering on. And I think what One Kilburn gives us is this opportunity to sort of say, we don't just want to kind of build a business group here, but actually this is part of a wider program as well. It's your voice, it's the community's voice, it's us helping you and supporting you in that process. Actually, if everyone's at the table, then it all makes sense. And that's a really powerful narrative to hang this on, is this sense that they're kind of part of something bigger, when actually they kind of haven't really thought about that up until now. And we're kind of pushing that agenda quite hard at the moment, because it takes time for them to kind of understand that they are on this journey with us, and to build that trust. So kind of the projects kind of get their buy-in and build that trust, and then hopefully we get them into this partnership process as part of that process. I think what we're very keen to do is, as you all know, this is never a sort of perfect world. I mean, and we sort of part of the strapline for sort of improving Kilburn is better, not perfect, because you can't make perfect. You've got to go into it. You've got to say to people, we don't have all the funding that we need all in one place at the moment. We don't have all the answers to every problem that's happening in the town centre. It's going to take time. You're on a sort of longer journey. There's no overnight fix. You've got to be able to kind of start with the things that are within our power to control. But I think actually the important thing is to be honest with your community about that process, because otherwise they think you do have a magic wand, and then as soon as they realise you don't, you've lost them. So we're keen to sort of make that happen. And I think one of the ways that the next step for us really is how to make that happen is in terms of a sort of wider action plan. And one of the things that all our kind of projects have done up to date is they felt a little bit random. It's like, why are you doing this when actually our focus is on the crime and antisocial behaviour? Why are you sort of, the app's great, but kind of why aren't you tackling the cleanliness issues that we see day to day outside our front door? And you've kind of got to explain to people that we need everyone's ideas to come together, and we need to get those down in such a way that you kind of can make sense of it, because actually all the projects that we've been doing to date and some of the quick wins that we're going to start them off with going forward, they're still all individual pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. But actually, if you've got that plan that builds the picture, then suddenly you can see why one piece has been laid there and one piece has been laid there, and it all starts to come together. So that's the next sort of critical stage in our business journey for them, is let's get them in the room, make them realise they're part of this bigger picture, and let's show them where it's going. So fingers crossed. And I'll hand you back to Tom.
Thanks, Richard. Richard's work over the last few years has been fundamental. So a real kind of whole network of businesses that Richard has relationships with, and that was really, really a fundamental kind of part of the foundations of One Kilburn. In terms of One Kilburn, this was just to go back to Power to Change and the GLA and their kind of community improvement district pilot. We quickly changed the name to One Kilburn by popular request. But essentially, we had an opportunity to develop a new approach to community-led regeneration. We were provided with funding, a little bit of guidance, but kind of free rein to try some new things and a bit of funding. And our approach has been to co-produce the partnership with local people. By local people, I mean residents groups, local institutions, businesses, of course, and anyone else that really cares about Kilburn. So our approach has been to kind of be quite iterative and responsive, which I think for officers can be quite stressful. You know, we haven't got like a fixed plan that we feel really comfortable about, but instead we've kind of taken a kind of responsive approach. I've highlighted a few of the key elements of One Kilburn up there. And as I say, we've kind of, this approach has been developed through being out on the ground, through walkabouts, through some of the projects that were mentioned earlier that really enabled us to get out there and build relationships with local people. And through that, we've developed some key components of One Kilburn as a community partnership. Underpinning the work are some values and principles that we wrote together. Took a while, as you can imagine, but that was really important. We've also worked together as a community to develop an online platform, which was really important to kind of as a place where we could give One Kilburn some identity. We enable people, particularly those people with a bit less time on their hands, to sort of share their thoughts on Kilburn and experiences. To hear about what's going on and share their views. Quite early on in the work, we would have kind of our One Kilburn community meetings. We'd have 40 or 50 people there. And it was very clear early on that it wasn't particularly diverse or representative of Kilburn. So again, in the spirit of kind of responding to and being iterative, we worked together as councils with the local community to develop a community activator program. That's where most of the funding from the GLA and Power to Change went, actually. And essentially, that was about developing a role with a local community organisation where we train and support 3 local people and recruit London Living Wage to go out into their communities, use their networks and bring more people into the conversation locally. And over time, that certainly has diversified the range of people involved in One Kilburn, although there's definitely work to do. And as we've gone along, we've realised that by spending more time out and about in Kilburn with local people, building trust, they've shared a lot with us, and we've started to really develop our understanding of Kilburn in a way that would not have been possible if we'd have just done a kind of consultation exercise on a kind of over a week, for example. And in response to that, we've developed a range of subgroups with local people. So they are on particular issues that people care about, where, in our kind of monthly One Kilburn meeting, there isn't enough time to go into depth on those particular issues. We've worked with local people and organisations to develop, I think there are about 7 or 8 subgroups. It's getting a bit out of hand, but it's really positive. Real diversity of different subgroups. I mean, one is focused on public toilet access. We would never have thought that would be one of the top issues for local people, but it is. And that group is, it's quite amazing, really. It's bringing together academics, the councils, local people, groups representing people that are disproportionately impacted by the lack of toilet access, and coming up with solutions in a real life setting. There are lots of other subgroups as well. One of them was focused on branding and communications. That came out quite strongly in our High Street Task Force workshop, the second one that we had, that communicating and marketing place was super important. So that's one contribution to that. Also, we realised through talking with local people, they were buzzing with ideas. And in many cases, people needed space to actually bring those ideas to life. So we managed to secure a bit of funding from UK SPF and brought back into use a space within Kilburn Grange Park, a beautiful wooden building that was previously a children's adventure centre. It's got an amazing park, which, I mean, I'd recommend you go to. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And we've worked with One Kilburn to kind of develop a bit of a brief for how that space is used. One particular One Kilburn member, Kilburn State of Mind, are kind of the main tenant there, and they're working to kind of bring in other members to use that space in ways that respond to lots of things that people care about. So there's lots of support for people experiencing mental health issues, for example. There's space where people can access music tuition. There's coffee mornings, space for the subgroups to come together and talk about the things that they care about. I think there's going to be a little cafe open soon, very sort of small scale community cafe. And of course, the toilets are open. Well, they will be soon, which is great news. Couple more. As I mentioned, space is really important, but also funding to bring those ideas to life. And we worked, again, with a subgroup, the One Kilburn funding subgroup, to develop the One Kilburn Community Fund, which, as with most other elements, was co-produced with local people. And we brought together, we convened people that were interested. We designed the whole thing together. It took about 3 or 4 months, much slower than it would have if 3 or 4 council officers sat in a room, but much more impressive, and the outcomes kind of reflect that. So we designed all elements, be it the kind of purpose, the criteria, aims, the marketing approach to get the word out locally about this fund. Some local people organise workshops to help people develop their ideas and to give them confidence to apply. And in the end, we received, I think, 23 proposals from across Kilburn, Brent, Camden, Westminster. 13 of them were deemed to be good to go, which was one of the criteria set, and went out to public vote. And a couple of weeks ago, we identified one organisation which was the most popular, which I'll mention in a sec. And just finally, just to highlight that we also create space for imagining. It's all very chaotic with One Kilburn at times, and it's really important. It was very useful to have the High Street Task Force come to support us in Kilburn and provide a space for local people to come together and talk about some key things such as marketing, place activation, and other matters. So that's been really, really important too. And just to flag the winner of the One Kilburn Community Fund, there's a bit of information about there, which I've already covered, but it's been really, really amazing. And when we talked with colleagues internally about the fund and the fact that we had so many ideas, they very quickly sort of said, "Why don't we fund more?" So at the moment, we're going through a process where we hope to fund more of those projects. And you can imagine if we have sort of between 10 and 20, the sort of across Kilburn, the scale of that. Even though they're often very small scale, but the impact could be really good, both visually and for those people that are both delivering those projects and the people benefiting from them. It's all come from Kilburn. We've just facilitated.
Yeah, so to talk a little bit about sort of One Kilburn achievements, I think this is an interesting one for local authorities because certainly where we are at the moment on the Brent side, you always get sort of those higher ups sort of saying, but you've had 6 partnership meetings of this group now. Where's the Constitution bank account? Why haven't they accessed sort of £50,000 in funding? What have you been doing down there? And you kind of sort of, and what I love about, I've got a colleague called Sue who heads up the sort of One Kilburn community side of things. And bless her, she's lovely. And she sort of says, look, actually, we don't kind of have from an engagement point of view, we don't have a kind of specific role here. We're just kind of letting it work out as it goes along. And what you've kind of got to look at in these processes is that we're bringing together 2 communities from different sides of a borough boundary that has sort of historically always existed. We're bringing them together, bringing in people from different parts of the borough that have kind of been excluded from various processes, and sort of overcoming 20 odd years of division and sort of saying to them, look, we've got more in common with each other than what divides us. And this is the thing with sort of One Kilburn, that it's open to a whole range of possibilities. And yes, it can be a little bit sort of chaotic at times, and there's lots of ideas coming forward and whatever, but it takes time. People have never done this before, and it's an achievement to sort of get different people in a room without them sort of throwing punches at each other sometimes. I mean, it's that kind of sort of local partisan politics that you kind of have to overcome in these processes. So kind of to get where we have with this kind of this concept, this brand, this sort of activation, having sort of projects that we can bring forward, the commitment from us to make this happen is really great. And actually, Tom's mentioned the sort of community toilets program. This is kind of, I think in a nutshell, sort of summarises exactly what we wanted from this program, because we had a community organisation who's saying, look, local toilet provision on Kilburn High Road is a problem. There aren't any. How do we make it happen? And how do we get sort of marginalised residents to be using people's facilities? And we went out there and we got them engaged with the businesses and got them putting that point of view across. And you kind of, you know, businesses are sort of going to say, I don't want to open my toilets up because if no one's going to buy anything, then I'm not interested, or they'll only go in there and they'll sort of be doing antisocial behaviour in there. But actually, once you sort of sit down and have the conversation with them, you realise they're a lot more amenable. And we had 16 businesses sign up to our community toilet scheme, which I think is a kind of fantastic thing. But it's a ground-up project working with local businesses. And if that doesn't kind of encapsulate everything that we're trying to achieve at the moment, then I don't know what is. And it kind of certainly gives us, when we talk about this work, the right project to kind of be talking about in many ways. So we're very pleased about that. And where things go in 2024, I think, I have no idea. We'll see.
Cheers, Richard. Just to highlight some learning. As I mentioned, the way in which we've gone about the work takes time. We see the work as kind of an ongoing process. There's no end, which is terrifying, but it's kind of just the way in which we designed it. So rather than being a one-off event and everyone going home, it's an ongoing process. The physical change has motivated people, which is really good. And I think the ongoing kind of collaboration with local people is super important, because local people seem to really value that, and it's given us a basis to build trust, which is probably the most important thing in this work. I think there's work to do. It's been Richard kind of hinted at that just a moment ago. We're not going to dictate what One Kilburn becomes. So there's still work to do to kind of enable local people and all the people involved to kind of refine the purpose. I mean, it could go in all sorts of directions. It could be that One Kilburn becomes a body that takes on space and activates it for community benefit. It could be that it becomes a platform for local projects. It could just be a space for people to debate and discuss the future of their local neighbourhood. That's for local people to decide. But that doesn't mean that we as councils are not aware of our role or roles. That's incredibly important. And you perhaps have noticed that many of the projects that we focused on are not, in some ways, responding to the massive challenges that we have in Kilburn around road safety, for example, or poor air quality is worse than Euston Road. So we can't lose sight of that. And we need to use this as a platform for addressing some of those more fundamental problems and to build a case for the investment, the level of investment that's needed. But we really believe that that community-led approach can sit along very comfortably alongside kind of our work to make the case for that more transformational change, and actually will probably make it much more possible and much more successful once we hopefully do get the funding. Actually, at the end of this month, there's some of that. Finally, after 15 years, the top part of the high road is getting the sort of first phase of the transport and public realm improvements are happening. Thank you, Brent. So what's next? We'll continue to enable One Kilburn through all of the things on their space, through enabling the group to consider different governance models, through extra funding to fund those small-scale community-led projects. So that will continue. We've got some big projects in the background that we want local people to shape. There's a vacant community centre, which we want local people to co-produce a vision for. So that's coming up in a couple of months. So that's really good for maintaining that kind of momentum. We want to continue to increase the number of people involved and more importantly, the diversity of people involved as well. So that's not kind of job done, that's for sure. And yeah, to keep using the energy that we've created through our work locally to address some of those more fundamental challenges, as I mentioned. I think that's it from us, unless there's anything else you want to add, Richard.
I think just one final point, which is sort of work the HSTF brings to this, and Steve's coming out to talk to us in April and meet some of our businesses and kind of them enthused about the way forward. I think you can't underestimate the importance of that work, because actually we can sit here and we can talk a good game about what we want to do in Kilburn, and it's up to businesses kind of whether they want to believe us or think that we're kind of dictating a process to them rather than kind of encouraging them on a sort of bottom. But I think one of the things, if Steve comes out and he says to them, you're on the right track, this is great, I'm an expert, it'll work, they'll believe him more than they'll believe us. So that's your task, Steve. Okay, thank you.